I'm Nico Simko. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Claire, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of HR Tech Trailblazers. Today I'm super excited that we have Andrew Brown with us from Check. Andrew is a repeat founder. The first company he built, they sold to Google, and back in 2019, they built a company to enable any software solution to build their own payroll. And so with that, Andrew, welcome to HR Tech Trailblazers.
Thanks for having me on today, Nico.
Absolutely. The first question I have for you is, you are a talented founder, you've built a company before, you successfully exited it, and you then decided, I'm going to go back at it to build Embedded Payroll. Why did you decide to build Embedded Payroll?
Like most people, since I was 5 years old, all I envisioned doing was starting a payroll company, right? It's just what every little kid wants to go and do. Really, the reason that we started the business is we saw that small business owners were incredibly underserved. Okay. If you think about it, I think most people, especially in the tech world, we work white-collar jobs. You get a salary, you're paid every couple of weeks, and frankly, your life's pretty good. You don't really have to worry about your paycheck very much. That's just not true for the majority of Americans. They're working hourly jobs, they're getting paid on commission, maybe they're getting paid, piece rate for different things that they're doing, number of parts that they're installing in a car. Their pay is a lot more complicated. And so that's tough, certainly for the worker. It's tough for the business owner too. They now have not only a system to actually handle moving the money and calculating taxes for payroll, they've got a separate system for tracking the work, probably a different one for accepting payments and doing point of sale. You just have this whole mess of systems. And so what we saw was that business owners were demanding all-in-one solutions. And we thought payroll needed to be a part of that. And so we started Check to enable those platforms to offer payroll as part of those all-in-one solutions.
And why wouldn't these platforms buy a payroll system? Why would that be something that they need to necessarily build on top? It might be a basic question, might be a simple solution to it, but why would they do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think everyone thinks about, do I build, do I buy, or do I partner, right? It's the classic breakdown. Payroll is incredibly complicated. You're not only dealing with the IRS, you're dealing with all 50 states and actually all of the local government jurisdictions across the whole country too. So in some other markets, there's sort of one government entity that controls it. That's not the US, right? We have this state-based system, and so you end up with thousands of different taxes, hundreds of different jurisdictions you have to work with, multiple ones in any given state, and so it's just very complicated. As a result, very few people wanted to build. I would sort of bookmark, it probably is going to take you 3 to 5 years and $50 to $100 million to really go build a high quality payroll offering. Narrows the market pretty substantially. You basically got to be a public company to be willing to do that. So actually buying prior to Check was really the most common way folks would get into this. So I think QuickBooks really led the way here. They built their amazing accounting bookkeeping product. This was back 1 to 2 decades ago, and said, okay, clearly payroll is in demand. It's a problem we need to be able to solve for our customers too. And so they did 2 $100+ million acquisitions, spent multiple years integrating those together, and now they're probably the 3rd or 4th biggest payroll provider in the country. So it's definitely a well-worn path.
So if I read this back to you, there's QuickBooks was probably the first case for why embedded payroll needed to exist, but at the time Check didn't exist, so it was impossible for them to do that. But what they did is they were probably not a payroll provider to start with. They were a software system.
Yep.
I'm not too familiar with into it, but it seems like QuickBooks would be an ERP system at heart, and then when they expanded, the only option for them to do that was to acquire.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. I think, certainly when we were kind of late 2018, early 2019 looking at the market, we were inspired by what QuickBooks had built. We were inspired by what Square had built, or really what QuickBooks had acquired and integrated, then what Square had built, and then Toast also did an acquisition to build it. So we had kind of 3 data points of customers want all-in-one, acquisition is probably your best path today, and even then it's pretty bad, because when you think about it, if you're going to go acquire a payroll business, either you're going to try and acquire one of the really good software players who has a multi-billion-dollar valuation, good luck, or you're going to be buying something with some hair on it,
Yes.
right? And most of these are sort of more local, sort of service-oriented businesses. Like, it's not a software platform that you can easily plug in. So that's why we felt like the market was really just screaming for an embedded option.
That makes sense. Well, that's a great segue to talk about the market. There are use cases of providers doing it. There's a few. When you were starting the company in the early days, how did you focus? How did you figure out where the pain was the biggest and where you could really, have a wedge?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're building an infrastructure business, which certainly Check is, and I think to some degree Claire is as well, you have to have that ear, to the ground where you really understand the customer pain, and frankly, then you have to pick your customers. We call them our partners. Very thoughtfully. So for us, our first partner was Homebase, scheduling, time tracking for local Main Street hourly businesses. And the pain point for them was so clear because you had these businesses with anywhere from a few to dozens of employees. They had all these really complex schedules. So all of your data that's upstream from payroll, the employee roster, your hours, was already in the system, and they had an export payroll button. And like the experience of the business owner and of Homebase was exporting the data and then having kind of a bad experience in a different system. And for Homebase, they were spending money like maintaining these exports and then giving a bad experience to their customers. So they said, hold on, what if instead of spending money on an export payroll button, we can turn it into a run payroll button and make money, and our customers will be happier? Like, this just seems better all around. So that was sort of the initial entry point for us.
That makes sense, and we all know that this was a very successful endeavor for you. Check is known in the industry, and at least for people who follow the HR tech industry, as the leader for having figured out that integration in the early days. One question maybe is, what was an anti-market for you? Because the market sometimes is so big that it's as important to figure out who you want to go after and who you don't. And maybe sometimes it's like, well, we don't right now because eventually we will get to it. But how did you, what was your initial market where you're like, maybe this one is going to be later down the line, or maybe never. We will never go after this size.
Yeah. In the early days, we really thought of what we were building as a general purpose API for running payroll. Mm-hmm. So that meant really anyone who could write code and wanted to build a payroll solution could come and build on us. All of our earliest partners were platforms serving small and medium-sized businesses, but we weren't sort of exclusively talking to them. If you came to us and said, hey, I remember a guy ran like a copper mine or something and came and wanted to improve their own internal legacy system, and we gave him an API key in the first year or two to see what he could do. And ultimately what we realized is those more sort of direct use cases aren't our business. At least they're not our business today. And Check is exclusively focused on the embedded payroll use case for platforms. And the reason for that is something that I think actually most people in the industry still don't understand, is that the actual payroll engine, the APIs that are needed in order to do embedded payroll are really just the first starting point. That's what we focused on in our first 2 or 3 years. For the last several years, we've been focused on how do we really enable our partners to build, launch, and scale incredibly successful, kind of high attach payroll business lines, of which calculating taxes and moving money is like step 1, and then there's 15 steps after that.
And so talk to me maybe about those steps. It's what has made a software provider become a successful payroll provider?
Yeah.
Because it's a cultural shift. It's not something that they've potentially culturally sold. It's also a competitive market. You go to businesses that, in the case of a scheduling system, that they use you for scheduling, but now they have to see you as their payroll provider. Talk to me a little bit about what has worked. What are some of the things that have really, giving you the success that you have today?
Yeah, for sure. I think it starts with the platforms we work with really understanding how they fit into their customers' lives and the customer psychology around it, right? So sometimes platforms do come to me and say, hey, should I do payroll? And then they explain their product, and I'm like, you don't really touch their team at all. I'm not sure they think about you in this way. Maybe you can get there if you add a few things over years, but payroll's not right for you today. The flip side of that is for a lot of other folks, they kind of don't understand today why they need a different payroll provider in the first place. They're already managing almost their entire business, including their team, in this given platform, like it just makes sense that payroll should be there. So that's, I think, step one before even deciding to do payroll, is just asking kind of, do you have a right to win in the space? Once you do that, then you can work with us. And we know, we work with 65 partners at this point.
Wow.
Who collectively are serving actively on payroll today, tens of thousands of businesses and hundreds of thousands of employees every month. And so having worked with dozens and dozens of platforms to do this, like if your sort of starting point, your customer psychology is right, we know the rest of the playbook that we'll sit there and run hand in hand with you to help you, go and meet their needs.
Yeah, that makes sense. You have 65 platforms you work with today. You have dozens of thousands of employers that are there, hundreds of thousands of employees. If not, at that point, that gets to millions. Where do you bring check next? Like, what is the next things you're going to be layering on top of just purely money movement and W-2 and 1099 payroll processing?
I really think of where kind of the evolution of our product journey in like the following way. Early days, it was make it so you didn't have to go buy that payroll business. It was the basic APIs. That was step one. Step two was make it faster to get to market. APIs are great, but it still takes you maybe 6 months, a year to launch. Turns out the list of tax documents you're going to show is not going to be that different from someone else's list of tax documents. So let's build, dozens of embeddable UI components that our customers can use to get to market in a matter of single-digit weeks instead of single-digit months. That was kind of step two. Step three is about growth. Yeah. So it's, okay, great, you've gotten to market. How do you actually really successfully grow your payroll business? And that meant you sometimes needed to be able to, really biggest problem was around setups. Like you got to migrate your data over from the prior payroll provider. That's complicated. And so we took that on entirely for our customers and provide that as part of the check product line. So that's really where check has come from. When I look ahead to where we're going, there's kind of two phases that are next for us. Where we are right now is we have all of these partners operating these payroll businesses at really significant scale. And we're trying to make sure that they have great business lines. Not just that payroll is something their customers love, but something that they make a lot of money on and isn't a headache for them. So we're investing a lot in just these kind of operational tools for our partners to be able to scale, which is something that, again, in the market, I think people don't realize. They focus on, cool, how do I get live in a matter of weeks, and not like, what are the problems that I'm going to have in a year? And it's one of the advantages that Check has, being kind of the original innovator in this space and several years ahead of others, is we've seen those problems firsthand. We have the scars to prove it, and so we're able to build there. And then as we look ahead to the future, it's funny, sometimes I feel like there's 6 more companies that we need to go build, because whether you look at benefits and other there's just so many tools that our partners come and ask us for that still I think these small businesses are so underserved by.
That makes sense. And how do you think about maybe build versus partner for you, which is they come with a lot of requests for different features. You and I have talked offline around, for example, healthcare benefits.
Yep.
I'm not sure that on the roadmap right now is to become an insurance company. And so to talk a little bit about how you build products potentially through partnerships.
So I'm a product person, by background, a technologist, and frankly got into technology by being personally frustrated by the tools I was using. It wasn't that I was just excited about computers, it's that I was excited to go solve a problem. And so it's the same mindset I bring here, which is my ideal is that a customer comes to us with a problem. We kind of survey the market, and it turns out there's another company out there that's really good at solving that problem, and we can go and partner with them to deliver that solution. In that case, it's pretty straightforward. I think kind of the economics sometimes maybe are hyped up too much. At the end of the day, that tends to settle really where whoever's providing the value, tends to get apportioned accordingly, and so you can usually work that side out. That said, too often, I would say, in this space, what I found is actually no one really has the product offering out there that the businesses are really demanding, or maybe they have 70% of it. And I think the biggest thing that Check has done the past couple of years is work with these sort of benefit providers and insurance providers and other folks in the space to help them understand actually how to work in an embedded model, not just in their traditional model. Maybe they have a good service they provide, but the product experience has to be adapted quite a bit. And so, again, I think as being kind of that original innovator in this space, we've been kind of working to, I think, create that ecosystem and bring it along with embedded payroll and where it's going.
I think that's a great segue to asking you around any competitive threats that you're facing. It seems very logical to me that as everything moved to the cloud, everything moved to mobile, that there will be strong software providers that weren't born as payroll companies but want to add on payroll. It's a big space. Everybody needs to get paid. There's a lot of people who don't like their payroll systems. I think I hear more about people who don't like their payroll systems than people who like their payroll systems.
Totally.
And so I really buy into that opportunity. Talk to me a little bit about competitive threats in this market.
Yeah. Like as you said, it's a huge market, and there's a lot of people out there in it. I think people actually really underestimate this. We're so used to, Google having dominant share in search and, Apple providing all the iPhones. People hear ADP, it's the player they know, and they just assume, okay, they provide 80% of payroll. No, they're the only player with more than 10%, and they're at like 15% of the market. There's probably a dozen multi-billion-dollar, if not tens of billions of dollars, public companies that have single-digit market share. So it's a really big space with a lot of competition. So in this space, if you focus on the competition, you're never going to get anywhere because there are hundreds of people out there. So I think that's kind of step number one. You really have to focus on the customers and what they need and what they care about. That said, if I sort of narrow it into embedded payroll providers specifically, I think Check has been fortunate where when we got started, the most common thing people were asking us is, why does there even need to be another payroll company? And is that even possible for you to go build? Like it was a very, non-consensus, thing to go and do. And it was very unclear if our thesis was going to be correct. And that was true, we built for 2 years in stealth, even back in 2021 when we launched. I think now we kind of look 3 years on post-launch, and embedded payroll has gone from something that we were sort of evangelizing as the future to something that's increasingly the present, and that we see sort of the big players in the space have caught on to as well. So, kind of multiple of the big public payroll providers have launched embedded payroll lines. Some of the private companies have as well, and we welcome that. We think it, number one, shows the opportunity that's here in the space and the demand that's there from platforms. Number two, it makes us better. This is the entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? Like, kind of we all make each other better. So like we welcome that, and ultimately it provides better tools for business owners. But when I talk with platforms who are thinking about doing embedded payroll, what I say to them is really two things. Number one, you need to look for a partner, not a vendor. Someone you trust who's really going to be in it with you as you build this business line. It's not a small thing to go do, and you need to really trust them. I think it's effectively impossible for anyone who currently has payroll as their main business line to go and do that, because they're going to monetize embedded at maybe a third the rate. So, when you're the CEO making the capital allocation decision, like where do you want the customer to go? The place where you make 3 times more money, or the place where you only make a third? Like it's pretty straightforward there. So that's number one. And then number two is when you actually look at the technology platform, and not just the technology, but the whole kind of partnership and service that's able to be provided around it, and you talk to the actual kind of customers of theirs and hear what it's like, that's where by being probably an order of magnitude larger in the space than anyone else, we've been able to be very successful.
That's a great segue for the other thing I want to double down on is, you talked a little bit about your initial customer, Homebase. You've been with them for quite a while now. I think it'd be great for people to hear, maybe snippets of what you've learned in terms of better user journey and impact that you've had for both Homebase's customers, which are employers, and the employees of those employers, and how having a check-powered payroll system, really changed and solved issues that they were facing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the place to start there is to just share the stories of some of the industries that our partners serve, because I think a lot of them are frankly, it's the service providers that we interact with every day and never think about. So, we have folks who certainly serve restaurants and mainstream retail. We also have folks who serve both car dealerships and auto body repair. We have people who power, the daycare where someone watches your kids. We have folks who power agricultural workers, the folks who pick the food that shows up in your grocery store that, it's super convenient for you. I could go on and on down the list. Construction is another huge one that we have a number of partners serving. And so I think when you look kind of across those various industries, what you really see is it's a lot of people working in the real world with complex forms of pay, who frankly typically haven't had very good software tools built specifically for them. And so what I hear over and over again from our partners is mostly focused like at sort of the first level on the business owner. That's who they're selling to and who they're trying to drive pain down for. And so those business owners typically have kind of the following experience. Either they're managing everything manually across a bunch of generic tools, spreadsheets and their bank account and that sort of thing, like that's still pretty common. Or they're on like legacy systems, sometimes literally running on-prem, and by on-prem in these industries, it's like the Dell computer they bought 20 years ago, sitting in their office or whatnot, kind of a deal. Running software that was probably written in the 90s, if not the 80s. And they're doing things that are crazy. So like,
yeah, give me an example.
Yeah, my favorite example here is like there was a customer I heard about once who, in their old system, they were like, yeah, our payroll system, like it's fine. Like, how are you going to be different? And then you start asking them questions, and it's like, oh, well, what their payroll system does is it does calculation, but then they have to take the ACH file and go like send it to their bank to actually move the money around. Then they have to take all the data and handle all of the preparation of their tax forms and everything themselves. It's just like, hold on, that's not a payroll. That's like 1/10 of a payroll system. You know what I mean? Like it's not even remotely doing all the things that like it should be for you. So like that's number one. I think number two is just not having to move the data all around. So folks are often like, oh wait, like I took this out of system A and moved it to system B. I didn't realize that this one field or value got dropped. Now I paid my employee the wrong amount and they're really pissed at me. Maybe they're going to leave and go to a competitor, things like that. And you simplify all of that and streamline it so that you take payroll from something that, we hear people spend, especially in these more complex industries, 4, 5, 6 hours sometimes on a bi-weekly basis, just literally munging data. Like I didn't believe it until I sat and watched it. It's truly crazy. And to now, there's a video that I love of one of our partners. They have a customer who literally runs payroll from the back of his horse. He runs like a ranch in Texas, And it's like, okay, if we've made it simple enough, you can do it on your phone from a horse. Like, I think we've come a long way from, how the industry used to work.
That's incredible. So it is incredible that something that would require separate, different file uploads, and we even dealt with it at Claire at the very beginning. Is we had a workforce management system that was separate from our payroll system, and it was a file upload, and somebody had to do it, and it's usually on a Friday afternoon.
Yep.
And sometimes it doesn't get done at the right time or the right way, or somebody forgets to put their timesheet in, and the whole thing crashes.
Yeah.
Andrew, it was really, really good to have you. Thank you so much for joining HR Tech Trailblazers. And we're really, really excited to follow everything you're building.
Yeah, no, Nico, thanks for having me on. And at Check, we really believe the future of payroll is embedded, and increasingly the present is as well. So excited to share that with the audience here.